Hello and welcome everyone to the Q&A for Embodying Grace in Times of Challenge. Deepen your spiritual practice while navigating change, a feminine approach to sacred surrender. I'm Ann Patricio from the Shift Network, and it is my pleasure to be your host as we explore the teachings of Miranda Macpherson and address questions about her 7-month Sangha, which begins on Wednesday, August 19th at 12 noon Pacific. If you're unable to join us live, no worries. You'll still have an opportunity to join us and participate fully in this course. I'll explain more about that and more later, but first I'd like to introduce my guest. Miranda Macpherson, as many of you know, is our beloved faculty here at The Shift, a contemporary spiritual teacher, counselor, author of The Way of Grace, The Transforming Power of Ego Relaxation. She really is a brilliant teacher at the depth of presence and clarity and guiding people into a direct experience of the sacred. And I join with all of you in welcoming her to our session. Welcome, Miranda. So great to have you here.
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here.
So I invite you to lead us into an opening practice today, if you would do so.
So the most important thing is just that we take this moment to turn within and to drop into the ground of grace that is always here. So I invite you to close your eyes and just get comfortable wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this. Just settle back into your chair. And just receive the sound of the one note. And let it be like a magnet that draws you into the luminous core of your being, where peace and clarity, strength, and love are always available. Bringing your awareness to the breath. Let each inhale welcome you to arrive more fully into your immediate sensed experience. And let each exhale be a natural surrender. Seeing if body tension can melt. Letting the following of thoughts melt. Letting the need to figure anything out or fix it just melt. Receiving the inhale. Recognize the life-giving oxygen that arrives with the inhale. That is nourishment and loving sustenance from the plant kingdom to you. That you don't have to earn or deserve, just receive. Just receive loving presence, nourishing and sustaining you. As you recognize what you're in and part of. What causes you to exist at all. What welcomes you just to be here as you are, inviting you to just rest in natural, great peace where you belong.
Thank you so much, Miranda, for that. What a grounding sensation I felt in my body. Thank you.
Yeah,
So we'll
need
spend the
that.
rest. So we're going to spend the rest of our time exploring questions for Miranda as we prepare for her video course, Embodying Grace in Times of Challenge, which begins Wednesday, August 19th at 12 noon Pacific. Please visit our website, wayofgraceadvanced.com, to learn all about the 7-month course and find a link to register. So let's get started with questions. I want to thank everyone for sending questions ahead of time through our webcast. And for those of you who are joining us live, please type your question into the chat and I'll be happy to read them out. So we're going to begin with this question from Cheryl that was sent in through our webcast. How do we hold the events we are witnessing in our country and our world at this time? What advice and guidance would you give us for stabilizing our attitude toward what we are seeing?
Yeah, these are huge times and very difficult to behold because so many people are suffering and grieving and experiencing such great hardship, and it is painful to see leaders behaving in ways that are questionable, and the unnecessary suffering that we're dealing with as a consequence. So really the beautiful part about spiritual practice and deep perennial spiritual truths is ultimately it's always been about helping us to access that within us which is never rocked and doesn't change. For that, we need a spiritual practice that works, that has been shown to work. We need one another to help us to turn into those practices and actually not just think of that as turning into it in a formal way, like on the meditation cushion or in moments of formal prayer, but as we watch the news. So just speaking personally, a big part of my spiritual practice these days is paying attention to what's going on in the world. And as I sit there with my husband watching the news every night, more than I have in my whole life, trying to really stay in touch with what's really going on and discriminate between what's hype and what is actual just objective information that we need to be awake to and deal with and respond to. I stay present. I really sense my body very deeply. I sense not only the physical ground underneath me, but I bring my attention to recognize that the true ground of us all is infinite, actually, infinite support. I call it the ground of grace. And I open myself to just rest in that. And it feels like there's really infinite support underneath me. And that's not something that I grew up having. It's something that was cultivated through my spiritual practice. So I learned to stabilize in that depth of presence that gives a lot more support to my heart, so I can and actually take in, the fact of challenge and suffering and injustice, things that I'm sure everyone is struggling with, how hard it is to see that video footage of George Floyd's death, for example, how hard it is to see the death toll rising every day, how hard it is to see some of the poorest people on our earth having such a tough time. And I pray. So I hold everyone that I'm seeing and everything that is coming at me from the news as part of myself. And my goal is to regard it as our suffering and to meet it with love and compassion and to stay close as I move through my day to my quality of being. And that my actions and my responses, whether through email, through the way I am with the clerk in the shopping center that I go to buy my groceries in once a week, and everyone that I interact with is as noble and kind and humane and empathic and compassionate as it can possibly be. So really, this is moment-to-moment spiritual practice, and that's very much the emphasis of this course, embodying grace amidst it all.
Thanks so much, Miranda. Susan is asking, in your upcoming course, what are some of the new ways you'll be exploring the spiritual path? She's definitely taken courses with you in the past, and she wants to know what I will discover that you haven't previously taught.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to say that we will be working on the foundations of ego relaxation, that if you've studied with me over the past, you will already know that that is a very advanced spiritual practice. So I want to say first off the bat that even if you've done every single one of my courses at the Shift Network, you've only scratched the surface with what ego relaxation and the way of grace can actually offer to you. And many of the teachings that I'm giving in this course really represent a further development and application of that. So we're working with those foundations because they're the best foundations I know. But we'll be focusing more on how we ground more substantially, how we recognize more deeply in body, heart, and mind what we're in, what we're part of. We'll focus on how to rest in natural great peace and let the ego grasping, the ego activity be understood more completely for what it is and relaxed. So we'll be focusing more on the discrimination between true surrender and passivity than we have before. And specifically, there's the second module of our course, which is really about facing everything with what I call the 3 C's. That's new. The 3 C's are curiosity, compassion, and courage. So we're going to be focusing on how we cultivate these 3 qualities in particular that I think are most needed in these times, which are really qualities that emerge out of the deep heart, and how we apply them to the inevitable reactivity that is up for everybody that I know. It's inevitable that, with immense uncertainty and instability and unrest, that our fear is going to get triggered. So we need to go deeper in how we really work constructively with our fear. We really get to the bottom of each fear that we have, not only in terms of what it's really about, but who the self is that gets caught in anxiety actually is. So we see the identity part of it. We'll be focusing on what it really takes to really listen, discriminate between the wisdom of your survival instinct, which may be moving you to take a different action, and the anxiety, the mind stream of fear. That's the fear that causes the problem. But we don't want to dismiss the wisdom of our survival instinct. It might be pushing us to actually take a very different kind of action and respond to a situation. There's a whole new piece of work that we're going to do on anger, because inevitably, when we see injustice and the difficult things that we're perceiving in our collective sphere, inevitably anger arises. Inevitably, we want to look to see who's to blame. And that can have us just circling back on ourselves. Inevitably, there's more frustration because we can't necessarily just go out and do all the things we're used to doing. And if that anger isn't addressed and worked with constructively, it often can turn to depression, or it can erode the quality of our being and our relating. So one of the things that I want to show you is how to harness the fire and the intensity of those human emotions as gates, really, to essential qualities like clarity and strength. When anger is opened all the way, it's just clarity and strength. So we're going to also be focusing more on liberating the unconscious self-centeredness that no one wants to admit to having, but we all do, and how we can let that unconscious self-centeredness be seen and met with compassion, with curiosity, so that it can transform into deep empathy. So that's a pretty much brand new component of the course than you would have done on any of my shift courses before. We'll also be doing a whole 5 weeks on spiritual resilience, nurturing spiritual resilience. And so I want to take you into a beautiful new practice on taking what I call taking refuge, which is really about how we can work with a mantra or make a connection to an enlightened being that we resonate with, and really learn how to receive vertical support that helps us to access realms of nourishment and sustenance within us, even though the world on the outside may be shaking and quaking as it is. I want to help you to go much deeper with the mantras, and certainly on this call, you would have seen it also on the Optune call that we did last week. I now have this whole capacity to play harmonium live with you, and a whole new system that is pretty sophisticated. So I'm going to be opening up all the mantra and the devotional practices a lot more than you've ever experienced, and it's really beautiful. And I'm doing that because I think that in these times we all need a lot more soothing. Our nervous system needs the nourishment and the beauty to help settle. And we need the help. We need to be able to receive the transmission that helps us to plug right into the source of where love and peace and stillness always abide. I could go on, there's so much more, but the overall emphasis, what I'm really trying to get at, is that the approach, the overarching emphasis of this course is on embodying grace, which means applying the principles of grace and ego relaxation to everything that's going on, to the challenges that we're facing, and particularly to the fact of the uncertainty that we're all in, and how we harness it all and regard it as a divine invitation to really live into our spiritual practice in a whole new way. And many of the teachings that I'm giving really represent what I've been teaching to my advanced students in my local Sangha here. And these are people who've been studying with me every week for years and years, and they're not bored yet, so I hope you won't be.
Thank you so much, Miranda. And what an opportunity to drop into these practices for 7 months to really be supported through the process of whatever is in store for us. So Crystal is just clarifying. She wrote in, I know you'll be focusing more on deep land mantra meditation. Is that right along with your depth of inquiry of your work? And she says your work is pure great.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I don't think is quite clear to people that have studied with me through the Shift Network before is that the method is ego relaxation. And we practice ego relaxation through inquiry, which is one aspect of the Trinity, meditation, and devotion. And that equally those three aspects are how we let ego relaxation become really deep and dimensional, that supports organic, authentic, and ongoing surrender out of our patterns, our fixations, our neuroses, and into our more noble qualities, our essential true nature. So given that I now have this new setup, and also that I've been teaching a lot more on meditation recently, I want to be opening up more of the meditation practices and the mantra practices and how to really go deeper with that, in addition to the inquiry that you'll continue to receive from me in every single module that we do. So for me, the inquiry questions, I'm always shifting and changing them and polishing them. And if you've studied with me before, you'll know that there's such precision to my inquiry questions, and they're really a way of pointing your attention with the support of an inquiry partner that helps you go deeper and further than you can otherwise on your own. So, there'll definitely be plenty of juicy, fabulous inquiry that you're used to, and it'll go further and deeper this time.
The best of, just a deeper dive into the best of, which is wonderful. We've had a couple of people write in through Facebook that are really asking, it sounds like they're wanting to do the work with you, and they're saying, will you give us an idea of how to proceed, this is Karen, with our practice in the coming weeks? So what to do right now? And Bren is also saying, could you give us a few simple tips to help us stabilize in higher vibration? So I feel Karen and Bren are both asking for for what to do now in the meantime.
Right, good. Well, I can tell you some things right off the bat. If you go to my website, which is mirandamacpherson.com, and if you go into the sanctuary there, you go into audio meditations. There's some free audio meditations that you can do right now. There's one with a beautiful picture of Ramana Maharshi's face. It's called Be As You Are. And I would suggest that you download that and that you start just taking in the transmission of ego relaxation, which really just brings you back into the natural condition. And it's only about 7 minutes long, so you can do it at any time. And I would suggest that you do that at any moment you feel the need for a reset. And there's plenty of other practices there. Some of them are free, some of them are just find what feels like it's useful to you. I would also suggest that you go to my website and you just read some of the other things. There's a lot of resources there. If you have my book, The Way of Grace, I'd suggest you start reading that. And just right now, the kind of meditation that I've just led you in, where I'm really just inviting you to bring your attention to the fact of breath, the fact that the trees are producing this gift of oxygen, and that you don't have to deserve it or own it, it's just given. And as you bring your attention to the fact of that, to put your focus on recognizing that there is goodness here that's inherent to existence, that's always here, and by consciously letting yourself receive that. And you can also take that a little further, like when you go on a walk in nature, which I think is a really good thing to do, to just see if you can receive the ground under your feet and receive the ground as love, as if everything in existence is alive with loving presence, and that is just nourishing and supporting and sustaining you right now, regardless of what's going on. As if every inhale, you're just drinking that in and just saying yes. And every exhale, you're just saying thank you, acknowledging the truth of it. If you keep your focus on some kind of practice like that, you'll notice you start feeling more resilient pretty quickly. You'll notice you have a bit more perspective. You notice that you can stay in a trust, in more trust that somehow it's going to work out. Somehow, even though we're all going through such huge things, there is a grace and a goodness that's foundational to existence, and that you and I are naturally within and part of that. And if you bring yourself back to that recognition, it'll help you with whatever's going on.
Thank you so much, Miranda. This from Toon. Dear Miranda, can you tell more about your own development in insight, grow and broadening of perspective over the last 2 to 3 years? As a student, following you already for a number of years, I feel a change and a deepening of your teachings and presence. I also tasted in each online course I follow of yours. I'm so curious to hear your understanding of this, and if you could share a bit with us.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, beautiful, Toon. Thank you for your reflection as someone who's known me for many years. And for those who don't know, Toon actually came and did a retreat with me in India many years back. So yes, I continue to engage my own practice and deepen it. And my prayer every day is, let me live the embodiment of grace in every moment. And that's a very big prayer, I know, but that is my prayer. So I immerse myself in that prayer every morning as I'm just sort of, in the process of getting out of bed. And I open to the support of Ramana and the enlightened beings that I feel a deep connection to support me in that prayer. And I stay close to that prayer as I'm doing ordinary things like going for a walk. I stay close to that prayer, as I'm doing ordinary business like emails. I sense my body more substantially. My whole realization has become a lot more embodied over the last few years, because that is really my focus, is living it fully in every single moment. And when that doesn't happen, when I get caught in a wave overwhelm, or it doesn't happen very often, but if there is reactivity, I don't judge myself for it. I'm just curious, what's that? What's that really about? Who is that that's reacting? And I really relish, whatever I can find out about whatever might be limiting the flow of grace and the depth of embodiment. So yeah, and I keep reading. I've been reading a lot more very esoteric books from Zen, from the lineage of Ramana, beings most people haven't heard of, and from the Christian mystics, as well as continuing to, be interested in the places where these deep truths might stretch my personal psychology. And, those of you who know me know that this work is spiritual and psychological and energetic, all three. So I just keep working those edges. I mean, everything I teach, I really do my very best to live. And if you find that I'm not living it, please tell me. Be a good friend to me. Please tell me so that I can take a closer look and practice more substantially.
Thank you so much. I actually feel guilty when I feel joy these days, is this next question. How can I best address this and allow myself moments of relief from the world's woes?
Well, let me ask you the question. If you weren't joyful, if you were suffering, would that be serving others? Would that be helping them? So really I think that speaks to a belief that joy when others are suffering is somehow a problem or wrong. Whereas the point more is to let what joy is available to you radiate outwards, to radiate out as generosity, as kindness, as goodness that helps another. For example, when COVID first broke, I was realizing, okay, I'm not a rich person financially, and I had to adapt like everybody else did to transition everything that I did. 80% of my income came from in-person work, so I had to work pretty quickly to transition what I could to virtual. And also, take a bit of a cut in income, which was okay. But contextually speaking, I'm very fortunate. There are many people I know who lost their jobs, who are really worried about how they're going to put food on their table, whose situation is a lot less fortunate than mine. So, instead of feeling guilty about that, I'm just like, okay, I just sort of started to review people I know who were likely to be in more difficult situations and just make contact with them, reaching out, how you doing? Do you have what you need? Do you have enough to buy groceries or pay your rent this month? Can I help? And I also thought about people who I would normally pay a service to, my hairdresser, or people who I know would be very devastated by this. Can I pay for a haircut in advance? Would that help you out? So, when we just don't indulge the guilt about our good fortune, then what naturally happens is it just transitions to generosity and goodness and kindness. And that's what happens when we address the sort of the me consciousness, which is what I'm calling the self-centeredness. When we address the ego that's always thinking from the construct of self and other, whereas, when we get out beyond that, there's naturally just more of a we and a naturalness to share our good fortune and blessings where we can and let it spill over into our actions.
Thanks so much, Miranda. So over to this next question. Let me find this one. From here, from Ellie. Ellie says, I am a spiritual teacher who has studied with you in the past, and I'm curious how to balance teaching my divine work with taking time to do my deep personal work that I'm also feeling called to do right now. You've been a teacher for many years, so I would love to hear you speak to those times when we as teachers feel called to withdraw into our own soul work, and whether to do this while we continue sharing our message or to literally take the break from teaching to attend to our own soul work. I'm in an either or space with this and could use some insight from you as to perhaps another way to hold it.
Well, Ellie, here's the thing. I personally believe, and I've been a teacher for 30 years, I've tried to let it go, but it's clearly just my karma, so I've surrendered to that now. And, you know, I've taken a couple of breaks in my own time when I knew that what I was going through was too big and that it really did need for me not to be pulled on by anyone else, just to concentrate on my own process. So I think it's about really listening to yourself and really praying into what is best going to serve my development, not only as a teacher, you know, but as a human being. But bottom line for me is that I'm still a student. I'm a student of the Diamond Approach. And for me, that's an integrity issue. To have somewhere where I'm not always a teacher, to have someone where I don't have any other role other than to be there in the hall, doing my own inner work and being open to continue to explore whatever, you know, everyone else might be exploring, with a humble attitude of not getting caught up in my role as a teacher. And I think that that's a mistake that most people who are teachers fall into. One of the reasons why I choose to, you know, have somewhere where I'm always going to be a student, where I do the retreats of other people. I find I get benefit from it, but it's also to protect against, you know, taking your own propaganda too seriously and getting caught up in the role, which is about the most deadening thing. So I would encourage you to, you know, to always maintain some place where you get to just receive, where you don't have to be in any role, so that you can continue to grow and learn, and everything that continues to develop and unfold within your own realization in the personal work that you do will inevitably translate itself as more wisdom and depth in your teaching. So the two really go together. And just encourage you mostly to listen to yourself as to what you most need.
Thank you so much. I want to take this moment to simply let you all know that during this course, we actually presented on Zoom, and we have the technology is very, 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 very good at balancing Miranda's guidance as well as the harmonium sound. So we're using a different system today, and you may be hearing a little technical difficulty in that regard, but know that for the course, it will be beautiful and clear. I'm going over to this question from Brianna. Miranda, I'm so glad you'll be addressing anger and hatred in this course, because I find that it's not talked about much in spiritual circles. And I know it's out there. I could be wrong, but I sometimes feel hatred when I scroll through Facebook feed, where many of my Facebook friends are spiritual seekers. I sense this intolerance of shutting down to different perspectives, whether it's about COVID or politics, for example. Can you speak a bit about hatred and how it can get played out even in those who've been on spiritual paths for many years?
Yeah. Well, hatred is one of those taboo emotions, but it's very, very human. And it usually comes up in relation to the feeling of powerlessness and experiences of untenable pain. And it seems pretty obvious to me, and perhaps to you too, that hatred's a really big problem on our planet right now. And so we have to address it. And in module 4 of our course, I'm going to do a whole module on, you know, transforming ancient hatred into present love through forgiveness. And so this is where we're going to get to tackle those pockets that are hard to really own, but that are so important for us to own, the places where we demonize others, where we polarize in extremes, where we cut someone out of our heart, usually because something has happened that is really painful for us, we don't know how to handle, or, you know, it bounces on issues to do with powerlessness that are some of the very hardest things for any of us to have to deal with. But the interesting part of this is that, you know, these very human underbelly taboo emotions and states are really important. They help us to, to open to a depth of our humanity and to open to the grace that we need to let our mind and our heart and our instincts be cleansed by something that returns us back to our fundamental wholeness and innocence, even though, we can all feel it, we can all go there. And we want to let that be transformed so that we develop the maturity and the depth of humanity and the capacity to be with difference, to be with strong opinions that we might not ever line up with, but we can be with those differences in a way that is noble and graceful and human, and be open to just hearing different perspectives without necessarily giving up on, what we feel very deeply, but to be able to hold that in a way that's not defensive and non-violent.
Thank you for that. So this is from Audrey. I'm noticing that a lot of my practice currently is learning to keep my center during difficult moments in relationship with others I'm sheltering in with. What is a way I can catch myself quickly in my ego-based reactions to these difficult moments?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you'd be just curious about when you notice yourself reacting to your loved ones, family members, what does that feel like in your body? Like, what are the first signs that you're getting caught in an ego reaction? And if you were just to do a little research and go, okay, so firstly, I notice this sort of holding of my breath. I notice this gripping in my belly. I notice I feel judgmental. I notice I start to feel really frustrated. I know I want to put them right, or I get snappy, or I withdraw, or I say yes when the truth is no. It's going to look very different to each of us. And so relaxing out of our ego means we have to become really aware of our particular ego structure and how it works. And so the more understanding you have about your own reactivity, the quicker you catch yourself in the act. And if you really refuse to judge yourself about your reactivity, but you really deepen the muscle of your curiosity, then we have the freedom to really see what's at the core. Like, what is your reactivity in relation to those others? Who is really reacting to whom, really? I mean, typically what you'll find is it's a little one reacting to some family of origin member from your childhood who you had some strong feelings about, but you just had to kind of live with, suck it up with. So, once we see that, then we understand what we're dealing with. And then we know how to practice with it. We know how to go towards that part of you that feels like she's 4 and she's trapped with mom and however mom was. And, she doesn't have the power in that situation, however you compensated for that. So we can open our heart towards that part of you and just learn to soften, open, allow, relax, ground, breathe, recognize, okay, that's a memory that you've been identified with. That's a storyline that you're attached to. And seeing that, can we let forgiveness pervade it, all of it? And can we just be here now and let the whole shebang rest in natural great peace? That's possible. And just to let you know, a big part of where I've had to really apply my spiritual practice most of my life is in the terrain of relationships. I used to be very reactive and, very easily get upset and so forth. And that just isn't what's so anymore. And so now I find it quite fun catching myself in the act. And there's so much more grace in my responsiveness, with my husband and, with the people in my life, and more ease and more beauty in it. And I know that can happen for everyone because it's happened to me. So hope what I've said was helpful to you. It's a very important question.
Beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing authentically with us, Miranda. We're here with Miranda Macpherson, and we're learning about her Sangha, Embodying Grace in Times of Challenge, which begins Wednesday, August the 19th. Please log on to wayofgraceadvance.com for all the details and a chance to register. And we're taking your questions. So if you're listening in, type your question into the chat, and I'll be happy to bring it forward. In a few minutes, I'll be taking you into more details about our course, but first, a few more questions. This from Brian. Why do we go in and out of awareness of love's presence?
Well, I think you want to ask yourself that question. And I think ultimately that loving presence, we all want, need love, and it's what nourishes us the most. And most of us suffer because of some felt sense of not having received the love we needed or wanted. But at the same time, we defend very heavily against love's presence because the power of love's presence is that it melts our defenses, and that's what's beautiful about it. But, we tend to relate to ourselves as a separate somebody, and that's what we know. And so we're operating out of a navigation system that's familiar to us, thinking that we're the one that's doing it. And all of the great spiritual traditions have been saying that's delusional. You've never been the doer. You've never been the driver. It just seems like you have been. There's something that has always been, that has been living you all the days of your life. And so learning to let go of that construct of being a separate somebody who is the doer is pretty advanced and deep spiritual practice. And it's not a one-time surrender. It's ongoing surrender and ongoing remembrance. So a big part of my own practice is letting the surrender become total. But it's humbling how attached we all are to our suffering, to our storyline, to our felt sense of deprivation. And that part of us is terrified of loving presence pervading our being. It's like it equates that with being melted all the way down, feeling that we just dissolve into this puddle and be a useless mess. So we have to address these deep fears of what it is that we say we most want and need, and, just be open to practicing courage, compassion, curiosity with those attachments, with those parts of us that are really scared of the thing we want most. And so that's a big part of the path, actually, and of just learning to allow the dissolving of the me that we know. And so that's a big part of why I teach everything from the language and the understanding of ego relaxation, because I understand that human egos are just friggin' terrified. And so, we need that loving kindness, that compassionate approach to help us to let go and let go and let go and let go until all of a sudden we have let go and we realize for ourselves, oh, what was the big deal about? There was actually nothing to fear. You can't tell yourself there's nothing to fear. Fear isn't rational. You have to just let you cultivate the courage to go there. So that's partly why I love to teach in the long term, because 5 or 7 weeks ain't going to cut it. We need longer. We need a more sustained holding to let ourselves go deeper and further.
Thank you. And on the topic of surrender, Sammy says, for me, surrender is an action of opening my feminine vulnerability by saying what hurts me and what pleases me. What can you say? How can we surrender vulnerably, she asks.
Well, the surrender that you're speaking of is very beautiful, but it's still kind of a me that's trying to surrender, right? So it's wonderful to be able to share vulnerably your feelings and your needs and your requests. But the kind of surrender that I'm talking about, that really all deep spiritual truths have been trying to usher us towards all this time, is really about letting go of who you think you are, just letting your self-construct to dissolve. And when your self-construct dissolves, then what you think can hurt you disappears. What you think is a problem changes. you're just free to be as you are and let everything and everyone be as they are. And simultaneously, it's paradoxical, but that actually allows you to be more real and clean and clear in your interpersonal life. But spiritual surrender is really about just letting go, giving yourself back to the origin of your being. So that's been languaged in different traditions in different ways. In Buddhism and Eastern traditions, it's been languaged as letting go into emptiness. In other traditions, it's been, merging with God or what have you. But really, that's where we regain access to the jewels of the peace that passeth all understanding and the love that isn't dependent on what anyone does or doesn't do. That's the kind of depth of surrender that I'm inviting you into. And I know that while that seems very lofty and very spiritual, it is. At the same time, it's actually what practically liberates you and your life to be real and true and noble in all of your relationships.
Thank you, Miranda. So we have time for a few more questions, but before we take those, I want to share a few details about embodying grace in times of challenge. This is really going to be a powerful 7 months with Miranda, where you'll learn to be present and undefended. Please visit wayofgraceadvanced.com to register and to learn all about our 7-month 20-session Sangha, which takes place on Wednesdays at 12 noon Pacific, starting August 19th. So you'll receive audio and video replays, transcripts, and any other materials through our course homepage. I call this our virtual classroom. And also like to remind you that we offer a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks to make sure you absolutely love this course. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect to a private Facebook community group to stay connected with one another. Everyone who registers receives Embodying Grace in the Time of Challenge. It's a bonus collection that includes some wonderful bonuses. Ego Relaxation. This is a video teaching from Miranda. Ego Relaxation on the Spot. It's an audio meditation from Miranda. Shower of Grace on the Spot, audio meditation from Miranda. And Mountain of Presence on the Spot, audio meditation from Miranda. She seems to know we need that support on the spot, in the moment. So those are wonderful bonuses for that. Also, The Way of Grace. This is 2 chapters from the ebook by Miranda, and Walking the Mystical Path with Depth and Substance. This is an audio dialogue between Miranda Macpherson and Russ Hudson, 2 of our wonderful faculty here at the Shift. And when you register by midnight Pacific, August 14th, you receive Mountain of Presence. This is a powerful video teaching from Miranda that will really support you through these times. All right, we're going over to a couple more questions.
Okay. So just before we do, I wanted to say there was an earlier question about what can we do right now. So all of these bonuses, they're all brand new, by the way. I've sat there and recorded them in the last couple of months. And, very much what we've been going through in these times has been uppermost in my thought process about what I've been kind of recording as resources for people. So, if you join up, then you'll get these resources right now. And I hope you'll enjoy them and find them really useful.
Wonderful. Makwena is saying, how to keep going in faith and grace when one feels like the candlelight is becoming dim at times.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is very much part of the reason why we need community. We need the support of mighty companions by our side, not just friends, but people with whom the relationship, the context of the relationship is a particular kind of spiritual practice. And we need to be able to drink more deeply from the well of our practice. And most people that I know, could do with a little more help, getting a lot more out of their meditation practice, or a lot more direction in terms of how to inquire and how to pray than they already have. It's very much what I'm providing. But I think this is really, we need our spiritual practice more than ever. We need the resource of it And just, the conversation that I have with most of my friends who are deep practitioners of many decades, what we're all saying to each other is, thank God that, I had this training so early on, because if I didn't, I don't know what I'd be doing. It really provides refuge and resilience that we need more than ever. So I've always said spirituality is very practical if you practice it. And I'm a very down-to-earth Australian woman. I'm only interested in what actually works. I've had too much of my own suffering to have to address, to waste my time on esoterics for the sake of them. So I'm sharing this with you and putting together it for you in a structure because I know it will help. So I hope that you'll join me and come and receive what you need.
Thanks, Miranda. Donal on Facebook is clarifying, so it's our defenses that makes us feel threatened?
Mostly. I think that what I want to specify is that, we have human instincts. For example, our survival instinct, initiates the fight or flight response, which is necessary to, pack your bags and get out of here if you see a fire coming towards your house, right? And so there's a wisdom in our instincts, but at the same time, often we're very identified with the mind stream of fear and the defenses that got laid down in the first 5 or 6 years of life as our ego was forming from existential ego into a personality. And often we're not even aware of that. We think that's just us. And it's full of defense that we're not even conscious of most of the time, and including defenses against love, defenses against, receiving what it is that would most nourish us and help us. So this has to be seen for what it is, with compassion, of course, but seen nevertheless, so we can let go and open up and take some risks internally and regain the access to what's there that's deeper than our defenses, which is the love, the peace, the strength, the clarity, and the joy that is a part of your true nature naturally.
Thank you so much, Miranda. I would love to know if there's something on your heart that you would really love to share with our listeners, something you're most looking forward to bringing forward on this course.
Yeah, it's really that, things aren't always what they seem. It seems right now that things are going very wrong. It seems that our world is such a hopeless mess. And while we are in a time where there is, great strain on our systems, great strain in our way of being, at the same time, I feel that personally that I feel incredibly grateful to be alive at this time and to be in the middle of my life and able to serve at this time. It's very obvious to me that collectively we're in an incredible birthing canal. And birth, if you've ever been in the birthing chamber with anybody, it's messy, it's wild, it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to go on or what's going to happen. And it seems, if you didn't know how human beings came into this world and you came across a pregnant woman about to give birth, you would think, oh my God, this is a disaster. But then somehow, in the process of all of this, a brand new human soul comes into manifestation, and there's a waking up to, wow, the mystery and the majesty and the power of life, and how change and birth and death and transformation are all part of the same gestalt. So we need to learn how to be graceful with the intensity, to ride the waves of emotion with wisdom, to be able to discriminate what is defense, what is ego reactivity, from what is our inner wisdom trying to speak to us and move us into some new way of being. We need to evolve. And I'm dedicated to giving you a map and and support and a really dimensional and rich program with assistants who are trained and experienced. So there's plenty of holding for you to evolve in the directions that you most need to let go of what keeps you clunkier than you need to be, and to help you really rise into the noble, graceful, impeccable, beautiful human beings that I know you can be, and that our world really needs more of, so that not just that we find peace for ourselves, but we radiate that peace, that goodness, that generosity, and we share the spiritual shelter with others, and we serve our world in transition. That is my goal for this course and for you.
Thank you so much. Embodying Grace in Times of Challenge begins Wednesday, August 19th. Again, please visit wayofgraceadvanced.com to learn more and register. And if you do, by midnight Pacific, August the 14th, you'll receive that special bonus, Miranda's video teaching, Mountain of Presence. All right. I want to thank everyone for being with us. And as we begin our close, I'm going to pass it over to Miranda for her final words and a beautiful closing chant to take us out of this today. Thank you all for being with us.
So one of the things we need most at this time is just to find peace. And one of the easiest ways to find peace is just to take a moment to be still. And in that stillness, to recognize who and what we really are, who and what we're always in and part of, to take refuge in the grace that we're in and part of. So let this sound, let this chant wash over you, let it soothe you, let it nourish you. Sing along if you like, but let it take you into the peace and stillness that we need.
Still I know that I
Thank you, Miranda, so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. On behalf of all of us here at the Shift Network, I wish you well, and I look forward to having you on this course, this Sangha, or one in the future. Be well.